Welcome to TradersArmy.com, defending your right to build wealth and preserve capital for generations to come.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of the Daily Market Commentary. I'm your host, Chuck Fulkerson, as we are kicking off Monday in style, up 14 in the S&P, brand new all-time high, just achieved. Everybody break out the party hats and the piñatas or whatever it is you want to do. No, I'm just kidding. For those of you new to the channel, do me a favor, click the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you get the alerts and the updates as they happen. Let's go ahead and dive in. S&P this morning, we're up 14. Last night we had a live trade room. Shout out to one of our great members who said, "Hey, is the gap and go in play?" And we talked a little bit about the gap and go yesterday as a potential, as the markets did give us a little bit of a gap up. And the way we play the gap and go is once you get higher than the first candle's high, you're long. And so we've moved up about 9 points from that move. Your stop would be below the first candle's low. So if you did do that gap and go, I think it's safe to take your stop and move it up to below 31.81. I think that's a fairly reasonable stop loss point. Lock in a little bit. Make sure that you don't have any losses in that position. At this point now, it sets up for yesterday's gap, but actually the area just below yesterday's gap to become a demand area. So this 3170 by 3174. As far as looking for supply areas, I don't have any. And obviously, you don't tug on Superman's cape, you don't spit into the wind, and you don't short the all-time high. So that's kind of what we're looking at on this one. Same thing with the NASDAQ. Now the NASDAQ level, not quite as clean as the S&P, with having a little pivot before the gap. So you can use the gap area as a potential demand zone, but certainly there's no supply to be had. And then below that, we're looking a bit lower before we find any quality demand. Looking into crude oil. So we're talking about crude oil last night as a potential breakout trade in the overnight session. If we base below that level, we did get a little bit of a move from that zone, slight pullback, and now we're just above there in a small profit area. We've not really gone anywhere from that, so I think it's now time to take your stop and move it to break even, as we are 6 candles in and hasn't really gone anywhere. But I think there's still a chance for price to continue to rally, but take that stop, move it to break even at this point so that you take minimal losses. And then I think there's a chance that it will break down and come back down and test some of these lower levels, but there's no reason to believe that yet based on our 4-hour uptrend. Taking a look at the gold markets. In our gold markets, we've continued this uptrend. Our momentum is stalling a little bit here in gold, so I would wait to see if we get some sort of a breakdown candidate below this area here. It'd have to give me some basing in front of the level, but there's a chance that we could break down in front of that area. Moving over to our bonds and currency markets. So starting with a ZN in our 10-year note. So our 10-year note, we had a gap down, and this was another one we talked about as a potential on the gap and go side. And if you did the gap and go, then it's still running along pretty well. If you didn't do the gap and go, I think that this area here, which was the gap itself, it becomes a potential area of supply. We also could see a setup for a breakdown going forward. In the Aussie, we talked about the fact that the Aussie is in an upward trend. It's still in an uptrend. Yes, we had a big sell-off on Friday, but our 4-hour uptrend has not changed direction. Matter of fact, we've now just put in a higher low. So this pullback, yes, it was a pretty big pullback, but we've just put in a higher swing low. Price would continue to rally higher. So that's why I'm not really looking at any of these as potential reversal levels. The only way I can get short is if I have a breakdown below here, and then we've got a potential long entry down below us. But as it stands right now, none of these are decent enough reversals. If I go to a 15-minute chart, go a little bit smaller, you may want to look at this area right here for a potential 15-minute short time frame reversal, but I think you're better off waiting for the bigger areas down below. As far as the euro goes, very much a similar picture. Euro, we had this big sell-off on Friday. All it did was give us a higher swing low in our uptrend. That's all it did. And so our uptrend is still intact in the euro. And the tendency is, especially when you have a big sell-off, is to look at a supply level like this one here and try to get short, or this one here and try to get short, when in reality, I don't necessarily want to try to short those supply levels. Matter of fact, we're actually setting up for what could be a little breakout to the upside above this area right in here. Canadian dollar. Now, I will say the Canadian dollar, we talked about this little 15-minute supply area yesterday, and my thought was that we're going to slice right through that like butter because our 4-hour trend is up. When you have a 4-hour uptrend, prices are going to continue to move up until they run into supply on that 4-hour time period or even the daily time period. And right now, that would be a little bit higher, somewhere in the 764 area for a potential reversal. Last but certainly not least, Great British Pound, Japanese Yen. As we're looking at the pound, we've got a potential breakdown area here in the pound if price can fall through. This is very similar to the other markets, though. Our 4-hour uptrend is still intact, although I do have what looks like it could become a lower swing high. We'd have to get below here for that to become a lower swing low, and then we would have shorting opportunities. Japanese yen, we are still in between our big time frame levels, as our 4-hour chart is really still just in a fair amount of chop, so not a whole lot to add in that piece. But this week I expect to see maybe slightly lower volume. I could see a bit of a pullback happening this week after last week's strong move. I could see a little bit of a pullback happening this week, but our upward trend still remains intact in the S&P. There's no reason to try to pick the all-time high. Just look for quality areas of demand on reversals. And if those demand areas start to get broken, then we have better opportunities for shorts. So if you have any questions, please send us an email, support@tradersarmy.com. Until tomorrow, everybody, I hope you have a great day, and I will see you.